here is a story that I want to know if you can resonate with, or if this has ever happened to you. I've entered a social gathering. It's the holidays. There's tons of people around, and I go to strike up a conversation with someone. They ask me what I've been up to, and so I start sharing what I've been up to in this podcasting world. And not too long into my story and what I'm sharing, I'm not even really thinking of it as a story, but as I'm sharing and I'm just, excited and passionate, I can see that they've checked out. I see that there's just this glaze that has totally covered their eyes. They're nodding and they're responding, but I can tell that they're looking for an exit. Has this ever happened to you? If it has, you're not alone. I definitely feel it. And as I was thinking about it, the word that came to mind was frustrating, which, it is a little bit, but I don't think that captures it completely or well. I'm definitely not frustrated with the other individual. What I think who I am frustrated with is myself, because this creates a story or a narrative for myself and my own psyche. And tell me if you can relate to this, where I believe that I'm not a good storyteller, that it doesn't matter what I have to share, that my energy is better used elsewhere, because frankly, people just check out when I tell stories. Can you relate to any of that? Does that ever happen for you? And to maybe add insult to injury, think about maybe you have someone in your social circle who is, they just seem to light up the room. They take all the attention when they come in, and maybe you're not jealous of them. You're not disturbed by that, but it does make you wonder, what is so different about their stories than the stories that I have to tell? And if you have this narrative going that I've just relayed just a moment ago about your stories not being worth being told, maybe you're saying, well, I just don't have any good stories like they have. But I bet if you stop and think about it and relay their story mapped onto a story that you may have had, you might have to think a little bit. But what I want to put forward, and the argument that I want to place, is that if you're like me and you're experiencing this and you're feeling like you don't have any stories to share, I think you've got a narrative created. I think I have a narrative created in my own mind that my stories aren't worth sharing. And so I don't even bother to try to file them away to be able to tell them at a later date. I'm constantly on the look for a story to tell, constantly on the look for an experience to have that'll be worth telling. And so when I have an experience that's worth telling, I quickly pass it off and say, that's not it. I've got to keep going. I've got to find another story. I've got to find that story that I'm going to be able to tell and it's going to captivate people. I've got to make my life like a TV show. If you're new here, my name is Kaleb, and I just want to welcome you to the podcaster's journey. This is a place where I'm taking a journey as a podcast host, being on this side of the microphone and building a company to retire my wife. And in the midst of all that, the reason I'm doing this is so that you don't have to do all this, so that you can follow my journey and you can avoid the mistakes that I've made, and that you can I don't really believe in shortcuts, but you can avoid some of the mishaps that I've had and go around them. So that's what today is all about, is this art of storytelling. Ever since I had the conversation with Anthony Doe a few months ago, or a month or two ago, I interviewed him here for the podcast. If you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend it. It's incredible. He is a very talented visual storyteller with his images that he captures on film, as well as being able to write and just articulate really well a story in a written format that support. So his two things, the visuals and the written word, come together in such a cohesive picture that is a really powerful storytelling medium. And he's, I would say, mastered the art of storytelling in a short format. He's got most of his videos are, 1 or 2 minutes long, but they pack so much punch. They're so potent. They're not, as I told him, they're not fast food, junk food. They pack a punch, and they're really nutrient-dense stories. And ever since then, I've been thinking about the power of storytelling and some of the conversations Anthony and I have had through email, and just wondering how I can tap into that power of storytelling and what that would look like for me in my own life. And so that's what this episode is about. I'm not a master by any means at storytelling. This is the part of the podcast where I should tell you this is why you should continue listening, because I have all these accolades and because I have all these achievements because of storytelling. And frankly, I don't have those, but that's okay. If you're willing to go on this journey with me, I would love to share with you in a conversation as with a friend what I've been learning about storytelling and why it's powerful and why we need as podcasters to be tapping into the art of storytelling, and why I would argue you need to be figuring out how to tell your story and how to tell it well so that you're not having people's eyes gloss over. Because that's the takeaway that I have for today, is that you and I, we're just the same as our friend or our family member who's able to captivate the room and hold everybody's attention. The difference is they might be more naturally talented, but I believe that you and I can do just as well in captivating and holding an audience with our story. I think we need a little bit of confidence. I think we need maybe a little bit of structure in how we think about our stories and how we organize things. And maybe we just need a little bit of a mindset shift as to how we view ourselves as a storyteller. So here's your soft call to action today. As you're listening, I want you to scroll down into the show notes, find my Facebook group for the podcaster's journey. And it's a free Facebook group for anybody who's a podcaster who wants support on their journey. And I want you to go over there and I want you to join the group. And then as you're listening, I want you to be thinking about your story. And after this is over, I'll make a call to action again, but I want you to share your story there with me so that we can engage in your story and we can both get better at storytelling through practicing communicating it with one another. All right. Let's dive into this episode of Storytelling and Podcasting. Okay, so let's dive into some of these things. I was saying right before we broke there that the things that need to change for us are our confidence, our structure, and our mindset. So, and there's many more things that go into being a great storyteller, but these are the three things that I want to dive into with us today. So the first one is our confidence. Aristotle said that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So if we want to get better at something and we want to grow our confidence in it, we need to practice a lot with it. And so I can already hear you saying, but Caleb, how are we going to practice this? That's already my problem. I'm already not that great at it. So I want to give you a little structure for it. For me, I love organizing things and understanding the pattern and everything. So in our storytelling, if we have a structure or a form that we can hold on to, it's going to help us. So as you're telling a story, what I want you to do is I want you to think about three parts of the story. Every story needs to have a good beginning, it needs to have a middle section, and it needs to have an end, a conclusion, okay? And there's more parts that go into these three sections, but we need to make sure that we have the beginning, kind of setting up the background, the story, like why does the story make sense? The hook, how are you going to pull us in? What kind of set the story up for us? The middle is kind of gives us the actual story and what's going on and leaves us knowing more. And then the last part, the conclusion, gives us enough so that it makes sense, that their eyes don't gloss over. They're like, okay, I understand why you're telling me this. So you have to be willing to take your listeners, your audience, for podcasting, yes, we're talking about listeners or your audience, but let's continue to use the example of being at a party, So if you're talking to somebody, we need to be able to bring it back to them at the end of the conversation and be like, yeah, so that's why, tie it into something else that makes sense with your conversation. Maybe you're not going to be able to tie it in completely, but find a way to loop that other person back into the conversation. So let's talk about these three sections a little bit more. So at the beginning, like I said, we're giving a foundation for the story, hooking people in, kind of giving them the backstory that they need to know. I think this is where I usually get tripped up in my storytelling, is that I get into the middle of the section and I start realizing all these things that I didn't set up for the person that I'm having a conversation with. And I think this is a commonplace. I've not interviewed anybody. This is just purely my opinion right now. I think this is a commonplace where a lot of people who aren't good at storytelling get tripped up. Because for me, personally, what happens is I start telling a story, I get into the middle of it, and I start realizing all the details that I've left out, and I'm like, how is this story going to make any sense? So I start trying to back up and fill things back in, but the way I'm doing it is like man, I wish I had something to draw on right now, but like we're here in the middle of the story and I start putting out all these little spider webs back to the beginning, but none of them are connected together. So it's literally just all these random threads being thrown back into the beginning. And that's really confusing for the person you're talking to who's trying to move the story forward when you're continually throwing the story backwards and having to come back to the middle over and over again. So so that's where I think I need to, as I'm talking this out, I need to figure out how to set up my beginning more succinctly so that I have all the details that I need right here, and then I move into the middle where there's the conflict, where there's the pressure, where there's the stakes for why the story even matters. Make sure you're painting those too, because this could be another place where the listener glosses over. Because if there's no stakes, if there's no emergency for why the story matters, why do any of us care? And there's no action that's rising up to the climax or rising to the punchline of the story, why are you even telling me this, you know? So think about that structure as well. Like, are you painting the stakes and the conflict of the story in a way that people want to know what happens at the end of this? It doesn't even have to be, something, a crazy Hollywood, James Bond, Jason Bourne kind of story to have stakes in it, to have these risks, or like, I think we way overthink that. That's definitely my problem, is I way overthink storytelling and trying to suck somebody into this really deep story. When at the end of the day, it's really just about painting a picture so that they can understand and feel the emotions that you felt. So it's probably in this moment settling into your emotions and being at a place where you can communicate those emotions. And then at the end, the conclusion, like we're just getting to the resolution of the story and how everything resolved. So that's a quick structure for us to practice using this next week. As this episode comes out, it'll be coming out on Christmas Eve. So if you're going to a Christmas party or maybe a New Year's party here in the next week or so, or if you're listening to this later on down the road and you're going to some kind of social function, keep these three in mind as you start to tell stories. And it's going to be clunky. This moves us into the third point, the mindset shift. I want you to adopt a mindset shift of growth rather than a fixed mindset shift. A fixed mindset shift is going to tell you, we're not good at this, so don't even try. I'm never going to be good at it, and I want to avoid making those mistakes, so let's not even go there. So my mind would tell me, let's not even go there, Kaleb, because we know that we can't do that. But a growth mindset, if you're able to adopt a growth mindset, you're going to have a mindset moving into these opportunities saying, I struggle with telling good stories and with keeping people captivated in my stories. But I know that with practice and with this structure that I learned that I'm trying to apply, I'm going to, with time and with practice, be able to tell more captivating stories. If I always, every time I get the opportunity to share something and share a story, think about the beginning, the middle, and the end of it, and think about the conflict and setting the story up with the beginning. See right there, I jumped ahead. Set things up with the foundation, move into the conflict, and talk about how it was resolved. If I do all those things and I do it regularly, I'm going to get better, inevitably. And instead of thinking about how I want to avoid mistakes, I want to avoid looking stupid, think mistakes help me learn. If I go to this Christmas party or this New Year's Eve party this next week and I try to tell a story and it falls flat on its face, great, that gives me so many data points to learn how to tell a better story. And I'll know how to tell a better story because I can study what didn't go well for me this time. Did I jump into the middle too soon without giving the foundation? Did I just kind of jump to the resolution without even painting the stakes of what was happening and the pain points in the story so that there was nothing for people to relate to? So use the structure to kind of measure what went well and what didn't go well. And then the two that I really want to draw out with this growth mindset is that I don't want you guys to give up. We don't want to give up. We want to continue to push ahead and have this mindset that I'm always going to be getting better, and have this mindset that I'm always going to improve with practice. So the more I practice, the better I'm going to get. So that kind of wraps up today, you guys, for storytelling and podcasting. It's such a powerful medium and powerful tool. And we've already gone through that in the intro. I really want to go back in and talk about the power of that, but to be a good communicator, I need to let that sit. I've already shared that with you. And I just want to encourage you again, to head over to my Facebook group, the Podcaster's Journey Facebook group, and let's talk about your story. Let's talk about how you're growing as a storyteller and how you're practicing that. Until next time, guys, happy podcasting.